Hello, BookTube. On the one hand, of course, you're lucky that this camera has no smell function, because, of course, it's well known that I smell. On the other hand, you're suffering because it doesn't have a smell function, because Frida Bean is freshly washed, and she smells lovely. Just lovely. And a lot of the compulsive scratching and sort of grousing is gone. And once again, as the last few baths in a row have demonstrated, she remembers that A, the experience isn't all that bad. I'm right there. It's not gonna hurt. And B, the after effect is wonderful. She's actually smart enough to remember both of those things, which means that today, when I put her in the tub in the sink, I could let go of her. To fiddle with the faucet or the nozzle or the shampoo, I could actually let go of her while I did that, and she would just stand in the tub instead of frantically trying to climb out. Very, very nice. As a result, she's as clean as a whistle. But that's not why I'm making this video. I could turn on the camera and just do Grandpa Simpson nattering all day long, but I'm not going to. This is a book channel after all, and a minimalism channel. And I went out today. God knows why. It's roasting hot and incredibly humid outside. I'm still looking at all of the maps and the radar changes and whatnot to see what Boston can expect from the remnants of Hurricane Ida. I don't quite know. I think the most that Boston will get is probably a light spattering of rain. I'll have to check and see if the speed of the remnant continues the way it is now, then whatever is going to happen to Boston will happen tomorrow night, Wednesday night. So I will check all of that data tomorrow, but my main tip-off as to what's going to happen will be to look in on the network weather forecasts for Boston's local network channels, and also maybe for a couple of national channels. And if they are unanimous in saying that it's flood conditions, that it could be 4 to 5 inches of rain, etc., then I'll know that no rain is going to fall on Boston at all. None at all. Not a drop. But I'll keep you posted. But in the meantime, before that happens, it's awful walking around weather out there. And yet I went out and walked around. I went out and did some errands, which of course means walking out and about stories. I have a good one and a bad one. From being out in the world. The good one happened right away, as soon as I left the house. I settled Frida down with a treat and whatnot. I assured her that I would be back, that I wouldn't be gone for long. And I was no sooner down on the sidewalk than I ran across a pair of dogs who live in the neighborhood. I know them quite well. One is a big kind of square-shouldered quasi-husky, and the other is smaller and stockier, sort of a quasi tan-colored pit bull of some kind. And I know these two well. They've been in the neighborhood for a long time. They are vicious, absolutely vicious. They hate other people. They especially hate other dogs. And when they get going, barking and tearing at the leash to get at other dogs, they lose their sense of surroundings so much that they'll actually attack each other in the ecstasy of their rage. They used to go ballistic when they saw my girls, and they go ballistic when they see Frida, especially since she doesn't take guff from anybody. You are not allowed to bark at her at all. You may be allowed to pass unmolested if you avert your eyes and walk with a great deal of reverence. But barking at her? No. So it was nice to meet them without her. I have met them without my girls and without Frida a number of times. So when I saw them on the sidewalk coming towards me, I squatted down into like a catcher's stance, and I stuck out my arms like that. And a man was holding the leash that I'd never seen before. He was walking with the woman who owns the dogs. And when he saw that, he pulled on the leashes and froze in his tracks and started to call to me that I should stand up, that they aren't friendly, all that sort of thing. When she stopped him. The woman stopped him from saying that. She put her hand on his arm and said, no, they like him. And he was totally confused, but he sort of listened to her and let them come towards me, and they were all body wagging, and my face was right at their level, so we were smooching and canoodling, and I always love to see them, because despite how angry they are with other dogs, just blind fury with other dogs. That is poor socializing. Really deeply ingrained poor socializing that they reinforce with each other, and that has roots too deep for any human to dig them out. So ordinarily, an owner who adopted 2 dogs like that and realized that they were totally unsuitable for outside activity, ordinarily owners like that would have them euthanized. And this woman did not. She knows perfectly well from the way we've talked over the years that I consider her a hero. Her dogs are not only fed and cared for and loved, but they're at peace when they're at home. And she has gone out of her way to deal with their behavioral issues. Now, she can't fix the behavioral issues. I'm pretty sure there's only one creature on 2 legs that could fix those behavioral issues. And I'm not sure I'd even bother to try. She is taken instead to walking them at odd hours. You know, late in the mid-morning instead of right in the groove where everybody's walking their dogs. Later after supper instead of right in the groove, to try and cut down on the number of dogs that they see. And she's been doing that when we've met, and I was smooching and canoodling with them, and the whole time that I was doing that, the man who was actually holding the leash, kept saying, "This is impossible. What am I seeing? This is not possible." And she just kept saying to him, "No, they like him. they like, and they do, and I like them." It was wonderful. My first thought when I first met those 2 was that they were poorly treated. They're not. They just had a few elements in their socialization really early on that went bad and then froze that way and have just gotten worse with time. It's very rare, but it can happen. And I've had dogs myself that were bordering on that until I got them out of it. And even sometimes I couldn't get them out of it. Malin, for instance, my pointer, was pretty okay with dogs unless Lucy was there, my basset hound. And Lucy was always there. They were inseparable. Every once in a while, I would have Malin out by herself, and she was just fine with dogs when that happened. But whenever any dog was anywhere near Lucy, Malin assumed that they were a threat and went ballistic. And I might have been able to uproot that behavior, but I kind of liked it. That's a good motivation to go ballistic, even if it's unrealistic. I'd rather it be there than it not. I always found it a little funny because Lucy was covered from head to toe in 4 inches of seal blubber. As far as I know, it was impossible to hurt her physically. She was attacked a couple of times by dogs. First time, I lost my cookies. Second times, I just smiled because I knew they weren't going to hurt her at all. In fact, if anything, they were going to arouse her. She was always looking for the one. She never found it. My little hippo never found it. She propositioned vicious dogs. She propositioned cats. She propositioned fire hydrants. Oh, anyway, that was the good stories. I met those 2 dogs. I always loved to meet them. And the bad story was that when I got to the broad area of my destination, one of my stops was a little shop where I know the owner, and I went in, and there was a woman there, probably late 40s, early 50s, who's not wearing a mask, and the proprietor, my friend, was talking to her, was in a reasonable tone, was trying to tell her, it's shop policy, it's my policy, and it's now gone back to being Boston policy. There's a Boston ordinance. You have to wear a mask when you're indoors. And the woman was loudly refusing, and you could tell it was one of these gerbil wheels that these anti-vax delusional my freedoms people get on. They get on this gerbil wheel, and you really can't get them off it. Except in one way. There is a way to get them off that gerbil wheel of just reciting OAN talking points. And that's to cut right to the heart of the matter. And I did. Now, I confess, I'm walking around with a lot of anger towards these people anyway. That my country is mired up to its ham hocks in a totally preventable viral infection because 1/2 of the adult population is insane with this kind of Fox OAN rhetoric. So I walked up to her. I didn't want the circular conversation with her and my friend to go on any longer. I said, there are clean masks being offered in a container at the door of this shop. Put one on right now, or I'll escort you out. And she turned from the woman that she knew was trying to talk sense to her. It's like, what? Want to know, did I work there, or who was I, or whatnot? And I said to her, I'm going to repeat this one more time, and then I'm going to act. So you have one more time. Put a mask on, or I'm escorting you out of the shop right now. I don't want to hear any OAN talking points. I don't hear anything about untested or myth or pandemic or anything. No words out of your mouth at all. Put a mask on or get out. If you don't get out voluntarily, I'll help you out. And she left. That cuts through. That tends to cut through. But a 5'4" shop owner can't do that to every single lunatic that comes in the door. It's very frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. I don't know how many of you are encountering that in your own life. But that is not the first time that I've encountered it here in Boston. Just a few weeks ago, I got on the subway, which even when the indoor mask mandate was lifted in Boston, there was still a mandate on the MBTA to wear a mask in a subway car at all times. That mandate was never lifted. I'm pretty sure it never will be lifted. And I'm not pretty sure that it shouldn't be lifted either. It's no big deal. And imagine the good that would do in cold and flu season. But just a few weeks ago, there was someone on, I think it was the orange line or the red line, just talking up a storm to nobody. He was delusional. He was just holding onto the pole and just talking. No mask on, no nothing like that. And a couple of passengers were saying, "Sir, could you put your mask on? Sir, could you put a mask on?" He just kept riffing, and I had to do the same thing with him. I had to cut through the fog in the same way. I had to say, "Put a mask on right now, or the next stop on this train is your stop." And he did. He had one. He knew exactly what I was saying, put the mask on, and then got off at the next stop. Rather than wear the thing any longer than he wanted to. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous that we're having these kinds of conversations. Anyway, there are books involved in this story. I went eventually to the haunt of an old friend of mine who runs a church here in Boston. I mentioned a little while ago, I went there and he had a ton of books in the basement that weren't going to be used for a charity sale, obviously for COVID-related reasons, because his congregation is very old. And he had a ton of them. And he told me to just go through and take as much as I want. And I at that time that I was going through those books, I intentionally limited myself because I thought, well, I have to carry these all home. I don't have any muscular teenagers with me. And he introduced me to his new sacristan and said, "I'm willing to loan you my sacristan to help you take your books home." And his sacristan was a gigantic, brawny work of art. We have since become friends, become email buddies, where I'm asking him a million questions about his faith and about his past with Christianity and whatnot, whether or not he wants to go into the church as a career. And I went back to that church today, talked to my old friend, and he had boxes and boxes more new books. Not new books, old secondhand books, but more and more donations. And he said, once again, there isn't going to be a charity event, as far as I'm concerned, for a while. So I don't want these things gathering dust here. I will throw them away. I'd rather that you take as many as you want. And I said, to him, well, does the sacristan offer apply? And he said, well, I don't really know. Well, he's working out in the garden out back. Let's check and see if he wants to go, if he's free. I don't want to just dictate. So we went out back to the garden. It was a very hot, very humid morning. Sacristan was out there. We called to him. He stood up, stood away from his work in his jeans. His shirt was on the handle of his shovel several yards away. So he was just standing there glistening in the sun. Looked like some sort of rock formation you might try to climb in Utah. Just a thing of beauty. And he agreed. He said, no, absolutely. I'll clean up and I'll be ready when you are to lug anything back here. So I got a lot of books, a pile of them, where I would only have got a handful. I got a pile of them. And I thought I'd show them to you. What's going on in the background there, though, B? What's going on, B? Are you hearing voices? You're flashing and flailing all around. Hey, B. Oh, you smell so good. You do. You smell so good. See, and that's another positive here, that I get the impression that she's acclimating to her bath, because the first few times it wasn't bygones be bygones. She was resentful. Now she's perfectly fine. B, no slurping. No slurping. Don't slurp. So I want to show you the books. Finally, we'll get to the books. Here, Frida, come down. Come down here. There you go. And it's a pile. So we'll start off with the mass market paperbacks. These were all free, and they were also labor free. I didn't have to lug and groan and sweat and have my life flash before my eyes. First one is old science fiction. This is Piers Anthony, who a lot of you will know from his Xanth novels. That's the main reason that I know him, but he was a prolific writer, and this is a thing called Chalk Thon. Look at that cover. And this is, it was a new word for hell. That's the name. The title is the name of a penal planet. An escape-proof prison mine where the worst criminals in the universe were condemned to perpetual suffering in the ruby darkness. Anton had committed the unpardonable crime. He was condemned to Chthon for loving a mignonette, the sensuous siren spirit no man was allowed to possess or even desire. And to find who she was and why she was forbidden, Anton has to do what none before him have ever done: escape. And this is Piers Anthony wrote a ton of these kinds of books. It has been forever since I read one of them to remind myself if they're actually any good. And I don't think I've ever read this one, so it's in rough shape, but I don't imagine I'm going to read it more than once, so I'm perfectly happy to have it. This next one I confess, for the mass market paperback format. It just looks kind of neat. I haven't read it in 50 years, so I'm about due for a reread. This is Graham Greene, and this is The Comedians. This is a novel of his with an intentionally bored author cast of characters, a tiny cast of characters named Smith and Brown and Jones, because Greene, I don't think, cared at all by the time he was writing. I don't think he cared about much of anything other than drinking by the time he was writing books like this. This was in the early 1960s, I think. And this is a novel set in Paperbacks in the Duvalier, Haiti, where Greene went and explored, got a lot of on-the-ground feel and sensation and atmosphere, and then wrote this book, which is it's a forlorn love story, and there's a forlorn Greene type stand-in and whatnot. I don't remember it as being any much different than anything else that I've read by this author, but I'm going to give it another try now that I have a mass market. I remember the furor that it caused. Paperbacks Duvalier hated it. He was stunned and scandalized by what he read. Tried to vilify Graham Greene. He was stunned and scandalized by what he read in the book, the completely accurate depiction of his own reign of terror. And it can't help but have, that kind of thing can't help but have contemporary resonance for me, because autocratic morons are always surprised, always, when somebody samples their reign, their life, their rule, their whatever, and then comes away and writes a book like this. They always feel that way. It's like they're the only ones who don't know. Donald Trump felt that way after every one of Bob Woodward's books. Like, what? Okay, the first time was a personal betrayal. Very unfair, very unfair. Because I'm just great and everyone around me is great. How could this be? How could you be writing this? And then the second one, same thing. Just befuddlement. What on earth? How could you do this? And then the third one. So it'll be a little bit of resonance. I don't remember liking anything about this, but it was free and I wasn't even carrying it, so I grabbed it. This next one is a book, of course, that I have read. I've read this many times. I've had this volume before, but I never thought I'd see it again. Old mass market paperbacks, I tell you, if you see something that you want, you should grab it, because they are no longer the lingua franca of used bookstores. They are getting rarer. Slowly but surely, through sheer attrition, they are getting rarer. They're not sold anymore, except, I guess, for Books A Million in Vermont. They're not sold anymore. And with every year that passes, the ones that are being sent from shop to hand to store wear out or get thrown out. So if you see a mass market paperback in a format that you like, you should grab it. And I grabbed this one because it's just so weird. This is East of Eden by John Steinbeck, only it's got James Dean on the cover. I don't really understand that. I don't understand it. I like it, but I don't understand it. This is John Steinbeck's East of Eden, only with what I would consider to be its strangest cover. And I had this copy once upon a time, forever and ever. In fact, the last time I read East of Eden, I read it in this copy. And you never know, it might be time to reread East of Eden again. You never know. I don't want to waste a whole lot of shelf space on Steinbeck in hardcover or in trade paperback, so perfectly fine that I'd have a distinctive mass market paperback. Then this next mass market paperback, I believe, is the only Penguin Classic that I got today, and it also is old. Obviously, Penguin doesn't make mass market paperbacks anymore. And this one, I have this, but my copy is water stained, it's water bloated. It still holds up. Penguins really take a beating, but I couldn't pass up a brand new copy, new condition, copy of it, just in case my old copy gives up the ghost, because I love it. And it is Hell. Hell by Dante. This is the great mystery novelist, Dorothy Sayers, did a translation with extremely extensive annotations of Dante's Divine Comedy. And instead of calling it Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, she called it Hell, Purgatory, and Heaven for Penguin. I looked around. I didn't see Purgatory or Heaven. What a find that would have been to find all three of them. But I found Hell, and look at this is in a lot better shape than the one that I have. And even if I don't, totally love her translation itself, I love her notes. It just a huge chunk at the beginning is her introduction, and a huge chunk at the back is her endnotes, and there are footnotes too. So it's an amateur scholar's labor of love. So I grabbed it, of course. Then I got a mass market paperback of Frank Herbert's Dune. This is not the pocketbooks paperback that exists now. Totally different cover artwork. I really like this cover artwork. That is you can barely make it out, and you're supposed to only barely be able to make it out. That is a gigantic sand dune with two tiny people casting long, thin shadows. I love that. That is an evocation of Paul Atreides and his mother Jessica, and I love it. I love the visual starkness of it. And so I got this cover of Dune in mass market, trade paperback, and hardcover with a dust jacket. I had all three that I got from the bookstore where I used to work. And then, one by one, they disappeared. I went looking the other day for a paperback copy of Dune here at Hyde Cottage, and the only one I had was that new pocketbook. Didn't have this, didn't have my old paperback of the original cover, or the second cover, the one that sold millions of copies. Didn't have either one of those. Don't know where they went. Don't know where my box set went of the mass markets. But I grabbed this because, of course, in October, we get the movie Dune. And of course, that's the only reason that I would grab this book. What other reason could I have? Then I got an Oxford World Classics of something that I don't think Penguin makes. I don't think they make a copy of this book, and I don't have it. And since it was free and it's in perfect condition, it's not highlighted or anything, I definitely wanted it. This is Principles of Political Economy by John Stuart Mill. Lovely edition, lovely cover. John Stuart Mill, the author of On Liberty. I'm engaged in a series of Voxer conversations with David Murphy, trying to teach him the basic principles of economics. I figure this is probably over his pay grade, but I might be able to simplify it for him. And this will have an introduction and notes that I've never read before. Totally fascinating. This next one is a romance. I believe this is the only romance that I got, and it's in one of those wider square paperbacks. I got this as an advanced copy, and I got it as a finished copy, and I loved it. Just loved it. The author is Jude Devereux, but I loved this a lot more than most Jude Devereux novels that I read. This is the paperback of Met Her Match. With a lovely cover there. About a woman who has a bad reputation in town, reputation as among other things argumentative, and who goes to her her hideaway, her family's hideaway home, and finds a stranger fixing it up. And the stranger, of course, is tall and strapping, much like my sacristan. And they sparks fly, and it's really fun, and you know what's going to happen. You know eventually what's going to happen. But I thought this had a freshness and especially a humor. Jude Devereux is one of the many romance authors who writes contemporary romances and tries on almost every page to land a joke, and it's all mom humor. It doesn't land at all, but this does. I thought a lot of this did, and the minute I saw it in a box, I immediately did the calculus that we all do in our heads and thought, okay, I'm thinking, do I still have the advanced copy? Do I have the hardcover? No, and of course the publisher never sent me a paperback, and I want it. If I have a collection of romance novels, I don't have many of them in this weird square format. Look at this. Look at that. It's taller and wider than a normal mass market. I have a whole bookcase of romances. I'll gladly add this to it. In fact, it'll stand out a lot less now that it's in some form of mass market paperback as opposed to a hardcover. This next one is World War II history. There'll scarcely be a rummage through boxes without World War II history. This is Anthony Beevor, whose works I really, really like, and this is his book on D-Day. in what I believe is a Penguin UK, UK Penguin paperback. So it's a smaller trade paperback than the American size I think would be. And this is all about storming the beaches at Normandy, and it will be very much of Anthony Beevor's. He has a way of doing history where he gives you a broad view, and then he zooms into the specific experiences of one person. Then he goes to the specific experiences of another person, and then another, zooms out again, then zooms back into the personal experiences. It's a parodyable kind of history writing. It opens itself up to parody. Of course, we live in the 21st century, so there isn't any such thing as anyone who's mentally prepared to parody history, and there wouldn't be any audience if they did. Once upon a time, though, he would have been richly parodied for the way he writes history, even though I think it's very, very effective. I've never read a book of his that I didn't like. And I don't have this one. My only goal when I read this, I think I might read this, I want to read the first couple of chapters today to remind myself of whether or not I actually have read it. I think I have. And if I have, then I might read the whole thing. I might reread the whole thing today. My main challenge will be not to hear Anthony Beevor's voice in my head when I'm reading the book. Because he has the most nasal British voice imaginable. And some of you might be thinking, well, you mean he has a nasal British voice? The British specialize in nasal voices. But you'll probably be thinking, he might have a nasal voice, but it can't be as nasal as Stephen Fry. No one has as nasal a voice as Stephen Fry. You'd be wrong about that. I'm sure that Anthony Beevor has clips on YouTube. His voice is much more nasal than Stephen Fry. It's more nasal than any British nasal voice that I've ever heard. It actually, if you sort of squint your ear when you're listening to him and imagine that you don't know English, you can easily imagine that you were listening to a barnyard animal. It sounds exactly like maybe a really squat burro would sound, or a very big factory sow. I'm going to have to try not to think of his voice when I'm rereading this. Then this next one is something, I imagine this is a holdover from a batch of books that I found in the basement last time I was at my friend's place. Last time, you might remember, I found a little knot of gay fiction, including some Plume paperbacks from the golden age of Plume's gay imprint, when it was the only thing. If you were interested in gay literature, you went to the bookstore looking for that, because you knew that it would be good, that it wouldn't be trench coat porn, that it would be really good, that it would be really good writers writing this stuff, even though the world mostly hated them. Marriage was illegal, holding hands was illegal in a great many states. Great writers were still coming forward to say, I'm not going to write conventional science fiction. I'm going to write about my own experiences. And this is a selection of a collection of anthologies that George Steinbeck did for a long time. He did a whole bunch of them, and they were all called Men on Men. This is Men on Men 2. I believe somewhere in the little book room I have Men on Men 1. I'm very happy to have 2. Very happy. I followed this series all the way to the end. I think it got to double digits, and the particular flavor of this is Plume. The particular flavor of the Man on Men series, I think, as anthologies weakened, the more gay life became acceptable in the mainstream. So 1, 2, and 3 you are reading dispatches from a world that is, in most parts of the country, gone. And unfortunately, George Steinbeck is gone as well. He, like so many of the authors that he anthologized in this series, was lost to AIDS. Was lost to the big pandemic of AIDS, when it was unknown, when it was untreatable, when it was not just a death sentence, but a horrifying death sentence. You can just take my word for it. I don't advise that you Google any of this stuff. But dying of Kaposi sarcoma, dying of AIDS, was a horrifying end. Horrifying. I mean, most ends aren't clean anyway, but this was. It was, as so many friends of mine said in the 80s, it was something you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. And unfortunately, he's gone. Otherwise, he'd still be here and doing great work. But I was happy to find this. I think I may have tapped out that entire vein of gay literature, so I'm glad that I did. I can give this a loving home. I used to have all the Man on Men series. I used to get them every time they came out. I would get them at quite a few of them at Glad Day Bookstore here in Boston, a gay and lesbian bookstore that was open for a long time, run by a crank, and finally closed. But I'll be happy to have 1 and 2. And who knows, maybe 3 will be there the next time I go to visit my friend. Then I have a contemporary novel. I got this because when I was looking at it, I could not remember if I had a copy. And then when I got back here, I looked, and I do. So now I have 2. This is The Truth. This is an English language translation of The Truth About the Harry Hubert Affair by Joel Dicker, in a penguin trade with the French flaps. I wonder if this is a picture of our author. Yes, there's our author. I don't think he's written anything else. This was a huge deal, and overseas. And then it got translated in English, and Penguin brought it out in this lovely paperback edition, just lovely. And it didn't go over quite as well in America. I don't remember reading a lot of reviews of it. I really liked it. It's about a struggling writer, and it captures that whole mind frame really well without an excess of sympathy, which was great. You know, you don't expect writers to be unsympathetic to a blocked writer, but this one is. So happy to have it again. As far as contemporary fiction goes, I'll gladly reread it. This little book haul has a few examples like that. Then these next 3 I'll show you together. They're a set, part of a set, probably part of a larger set. They were free. I don't know if I'll keep them, but I couldn't just let them sit there or get thrown away. These are Russian writers. In what I have to imagine was a whole set of Russian writers. First 2 are Turgenev. We have this one here is Fathers and Sons and A Nest of the Gentry. And the next one is A Hunter's Sketches, or A Sportsman's Sketches, or A Sportsman's Diary, however you want to translate it. These are in this uniform set that I've never seen before. What is this, actually? Progress Publishers in Moscow. Good Lord. Is that so? Oh, my. I didn't check on that. Yes. This is... these translated from the Russian by Bernard Isaacs, but these were brought out in Russia. Wow. First printing 1951, third printing 1977, printed in the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics. Wow. All right, well, I didn't notice that at first. That makes them even more interesting. So these are English language editions that came out in Russia, and the other one is the selected works of Lermontov. And there's our bee-sting-lipped author. So I imagine this will have everything. Hero of Our Time, and yeah, this has a ton of poetry, long poems, and all the prose. Wow, this is everything. Good Lord. Okay, fantastic. All right, so that's a volume to have. So I got these 3 Russians. It turns out Russian editions in English. Who knew? I didn't know. Then this next one is another piece of contemporary fiction, like the Harry Hubert Affair, only vastly more impressive. I loved it. Absolutely loved this book. And the minute I saw it, I thought, well, I'm not sure if I have it. If I do, I probably have it in a crappy trade paperback. I definitely want it, and here's a beautiful hardcover. I would probably have said no to this hardcover. This is an 1,100-page book, but I had somebody doing the lifting. So, you know, that removes, it was free, and I had somebody doing the carrying, so I grabbed it. This is Sacred Games by Vikram Chandra. Huge, huge thing with the deckled edges. It just goes on for, what is the page count here? Almost 1,000 pages. This is at heart, I mean, it has a million digressions and so much atmosphere. It's set in Bombay, and it's at heart the story, the sort of weird parallel story of a Sikh policeman and a gangster. And it's fantastic, just fantastic. I think this must have come out more than 10 years ago. And I don't think Vikram Chandra has written anything since. I think this probably brought him close to the edge of death. And I haven't looked around yet to see if I have another copy of this, but this has the embossed cover, this beautiful, just lovely thing with the deckled edges and everything. I had to get it, especially since there was no effort to get it here. And the Henry Hubert Affair, I was really tempted to do a reread, and this even more so. I haven't read Sacred Games in its entirety since I read it back in the mid-2000s when it first came out. And I could not sing its praises high enough and was telling everybody I knew, you have to read this. This is an absolutely great novel. So maybe it's time for, maybe I'm due for a reread of a nice big fat book. I'll have to see if I have another copy so that I can judge accordingly how delicate to be with this one. But it doesn't matter. I often do that. I often check to see if I have a second copy so that this one is what Jason Harrigan would call a reading copy, so that I can be rough on it. I always tell myself that, but then I'm rough on everything anyway, whether I have a copy or not. Case in point, this last one. I found this. I would have passed on it if I had to carry it on my own. But I didn't. I had a sacristan with shoulders out to here. Abs compartmented off in different segments, each one of which was so big and so taut that each one of them could stand an inscription of a single canto of the Divine Comedy. This is the complete Sherlock Holmes with Sidney Paget illustrations in a hardcover. The only problem with it is the cover illustration, which is just really bad. For some reason, Holmes and Watson on the cover are extremely old men. And I know it's visual iconography, but Watson and Holmes are wearing outdoor hiking country coats. They wouldn't wear them in London. Holmes is wearing a deerstalker cap. He wouldn't wear that in London. The pipe is not anything he would go out with in public. It's ridiculous. It's just dumb iconography. It's a dumb cover, but it is a hardcover. It does have the double columns and the Sidney Paget illustrations. And the Sidney Paget illustrations are fairly light. Sometimes the printing the process will darken them to the point where you really can't make out the detail. And they are fairly light. And I never remember when I see a volume like this if I have it already. I never remember the state of my illustrated Sherlock Holmes. This is what I like. I like the one volume Sidney Paget illustrated Sherlock Holmes. But I often like getting rid of it too. I like sending to people. If somebody says I don't have Sherlock Holmes, that's what I like to send them. And so I'm always out of this volume. And I know the form that I really want. It isn't this. I wasn't going to turn it up for nothing. But the form that I really want, the collected Sherlock Holmes with Sidney Paget illustrations, came out for a while in a nice bonded leather red edition, a red hardcover with no dust jacket. I often see that at the Brattle, and I often give it away because it's so nice. But it's the most durable in terms of binding. It's the prettiest. It has the best illustration reproduction. Dark to shadow, dark to light type ratio. I'm sure that edition will turn up again at the Brattle. I'm positive that it will. And in the meantime, I looked. I don't think I have another collected Sherlock Holmes in print form. I have them in ebook. So I grabbed this. So there you go. That was a little impromptu, book haul. We have the complete Sherlock Holmes. We have Sacred Games by Vikram Chandra, which is really calling me for a reread. We have these Russians, Lermontov and Turgenev, but from Russia, from the Soviet Union, printed in English. We have The Truth of the Harry Hubert Affair, a very good contemporary novel, especially if you're a writer, you'll probably like it. We have Men on Men, Volume 2, by the late George Stambolian. We have D-Day by Anthony Beaver. He's really good as a World War II historian. You'd really like him. We have Met Her Match by Jude Devereux in one of these odd paperback volumes. We have Principles of Political Economy. I'm slowly working David Murphy up to an expert level. I'll get there eventually. We have Dune in this old mass market paperback, which is not available in bookstores anymore. They've gone on to the new cover. We have Hell, Dorothy Sayers' translation of Dante's Inferno. We have East of Eden, starring James Dean. We have The Comedians by Graham Greene in this weird mass market paperback. And finally, Chthon by Piers Anthony. A Piers Anthony book that is not a Xanth novel, to give me a taste of what he was like. I don't remember being very impressed by any of his work, including Xanth, but this was free. It's an easy way to find out. And it'll do. It scratched the book urge that has been suppressed in me because it's been too hot to go to the Brattle. So there you go. Some books for your consideration. I'm going to wrap this up before it gets to the predictable 40 minutes. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.